and the other is House Bill 22-1026 board position. We'll start with the first recommended action, but before I get into that, just a note to staff before this comes forward to the full board. Director Rivera Malpiedi contacted me to let me know that her district is not designated as District C on the map. It's just a green spot, and there's no letter designation for her district. So we could add that because, you know, Director Rivera Malpiedi, it's an important district. So let's add that. In any event, what we have, the first recommended action is for the board of directors to adopt the director district map identified as alternative E as in Edward, revised in accordance with the following discussion as recommended by Chair Busick and Directors Broom and Sloan. The adoption of this action will support the agency's strategic priorities of community value and customer excellence. Do we have a motion? Director Catlin, I see your hand raised. Is that a motion?
I just had a question about, do we need to approve the agenda before we go into recommended actions? And if so, I have a minor correction to the agenda. And that is, instead of audit committee report, I believe it should say ad hoc audit committee report.
Well, I did not see the approval of the agenda on our agenda, so it's a good addition. CEO Jim Johnson.
Actually, a point of clarification, Mr. Chair, February board meeting agenda review is item 4 on your agenda, so we've yet to get there at this juncture.
Got it.
And then to the point that Director Catlin made, I'll make a comment as it relates to her her recommendation, because it needs to be slightly modified in reference to the name of the committee. Thank you.
Okay, so let's hold that off. Second Vice Chair Catlin, if that's okay, we'll discuss that when we hit topic number 4. Secretary Sloan.
Yes, I would motion to approve the director district map adoption.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Sloan. Who's the second? Was that Director Geisinger? Yeah. And is there any discussion on this topic? Seeing none, all members of the executive committee in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Any opposed? I hear none. So that passes out of executive committee 5-0. Our second action item, let's see what we have next. Second recommended action item is for the board of directors to adopt a support position on House Bill 22-1026 concerning the replacement of the income tax deduction for amounts spent by an employer to provide alternative transportation options to employers with an income tax credit for amounts spent by an employer for that purpose, as the bill was introduced. Do we have a motion to move that forward?
So moved.
Director Geisinger, is there a second?
Second.
Director Whitmore, how about discussion on this? I'm sure we have some discussion because of a lot of people here. Does staff want to present anything? Mr. Davies or Jennifer Brandeberry, is that any input, or are we good?
Sure, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer. If I could, just a quick background on this bill, House Bill 22-1026, Alternative Transportations Options Tax Credit. As I mentioned, just a little bit of background. This bill was vetted over the fall through a joint committee, and the state staff wrote a report on this, largely saying there was an underutilized current tax credit within the Colorado Code. And so made the recommendation of either saying, well, the state could get rid of this, or it could improve it. Legislators sponsoring this legislation decided that it would be a better idea to improve it. And so they've increased the amount of the tax credit that's available for eligible expenses. And of course, expenses such as transit passes, like our eco passes, are an eligible expense under this bill. And so it's a encouraging incentive for businesses to supply those transit passes to employees. And the other piece that we found that is helpful in here is that when researching a number of other states that have done this, there's not a lot of data on it. And one of the pieces that this bill does have is reporting requirements to help the state justify and collect data that can show and, as I said, justify potential changes in the future. And with that, I'll hold and turn it over to our lobbyist, Jennifer Brandeberry, who has been tracking this closely in the building.
Thanks for that update. Ms. Brandeberry?
Just Michael did a great job. It's we like to say in the building, good bill, vote yes. I think the really nice thing about this in an environment in an election year when there's not a lot of bipartisanship, this bill did come out of the interim committee unanimously, and it did have bipartisan support coming out of the first committee. Not all of the Republicans on House Finance voted for it, but leadership is behind the legislation in both chambers. So it's parked in House Appropriations, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that input. Are there any questions for either Mr. Davies or Ms. Brandeberry? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. All in favor of moving this forward?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. That comes out of this committee 5-0. One thing I failed to mention with regard to the director district map adoption, it's not going to be on our February 2022 board agenda because of the redistricting outreach plan, and so that we can allow ample public comment. It will appear on our March special board meeting scheduled March 8th, just so everybody knows that. Okay, let's move forward. So now we're going to go into the February board meeting agenda review, and let's start with Director Catlin again. What, Director Catlin, Second Vice Chair Catlin, can you make that comment again with regard to the agenda?
I'll yield the floor to GM CEO Johnson. She had a technical correction to my recommendation.
Okay, GM CEO Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chair Busick, and second Vice Chair Catlin. In relationship to the draft board meeting agenda, item 7 should read audit ad hoc committee. And additionally, if I could offer up as well, Mr. Chairman, that there needs to be an executive session added to the agenda as well.
Very good. Thanks for both of those.
Thank you.
Great. So we will be adding an executive session to the agenda, and we're going to revise the proposed agenda to add ad hoc to the audit committee title. Ms. McManus.
So the executive session was updated and republished this morning,
Okay.
or yesterday, I believe. So that your copy just might have been printed prior to the republishing. So that's out to the public already.
Okay, great. And so we'll revise the item 7 to read audit ad hoc committee report. That's the only revision I guess we need right now. So is there a motion to move the February board agenda as amended forward to the
Mr. Chair.
Did you have a comment first?
I did. I had
Yeah.
another suggested amendment.
Okay.
In your comments, were you saying that the redistricting will come off of this month's agenda? I think
Yeah,
it
there's
was
going to be a
on there,
special
wasn't
board meeting on March 8th, and that's when that will appear.
it? Okay. And then the next item is the approval of the legislation. And I talked with Ms. McManus yesterday because it seems like those major sorts of things, the redistricting and the approval of legislation and things like that, should come up as recommended actions rather than on the unanimous consent agenda for the rest of the board to discuss and for the public to hear them. And Ms. McManus can explain kind of what she and Melanie had come up with. But I think basically they were saying that matters that go through one of the two, the finance or operations committee, could go on the unanimous consent agenda, but other things should come up as recommended actions. And of course, this committee could move something off of that consent agenda. But I don't know if I need to make a motion to that, but that would be my suggestion on this one, is that the legislative, if support of the legislation come off the unanimous consent agenda, and that we start to do that system that Ms. McManus has described.
Right, and First Vice Chair, you and I talked about this yesterday, and as I see the updated proposed agenda, it is now a recommended action. So it has come
Thank
off.
you.
The,
I'm sorry I
consent
don't have
agenda.
it.
Yeah, I just saw that too. So it is going to be coming forward as a recommended action so that there can be discussion. And Ms. McManus, for the special board meeting on March 8th with regard to the redistricting map, that would be great to have that as a recommended action, even if it comes out of as a unanimous item, so we can talk about that as well. So, but for this coming month, we've got that down as a recommended action. Is that all you had, First Vice Chair? Your hand's still raised.
That's all.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so now I am asking for a motion to approve the February board agenda for the board meeting on February 22nd. Is there a motion?
So moved. As amended.
Okay, I've got Whitmore and Catlin, so I'll do Whitmore as a mover and Catlin as the second. Does that sound good to you guys? Cool. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any further discussion? I'm sorry. Is there any further discussion after the motion? No. Any opposed? No. Okay, that comes out of this committee 5-0 approval. So next we move to other matters, and we've got an update on the governance manual revision. First, Chair Geisinger and Secretary Sloan, would you guys like to provide an update, please?
You want to launch, Marjorie?
Director Sloan, you're on mute, but we'll start with you as soon as you come off of mute.
I'm off. Sorry about that. I'll start and I'll probably have the easier part. Thanks to Barbara's help, we decided after reviewing the board operating guidelines and the board governance manual, Barbara suggested we divide it into two. One, just cut and paste items, updating things that have not been. And then two more substantive issues that the board needs to talk about and decide on their position. The easy part is the first classification. The more administrative ideas are edit the formatting in the governance manual, replace outdated material such as the mission statement that's not in alignment with the 2021 strategic plan. And I guess I'd suggest include both the mission and vision statements in the governance manual. The committee structure and focus needs to be updated, and there are some appendix items also that are outdated, including performance items for the GM CEOs, goal setting, evaluation process, and annual review. So Barbara suggested it'd be a lot easier to get that approved rather than having redlining all over the documents. So I really appreciate Barbara's help on that. And Barbara, would you like to mention your intent on getting the outdated material replaced?
Yes, I'm going to be working on that next week to make all of those administrative changes. In the last version of the bylaws, we did approve making administrative changes without board approval as needed, just to have one less thing to bring forward. So I will work on that document on version control, so we have a record of what the changes were made. And from that point on, then we can move forward to the changes that Director Sloan and Director Geisinger are suggesting as substantive changes in those documents.
Thank you, Barbara. Then I will hand the baton over to Lynn to talk about proposed languages for the item that kicked off all this discussion and review, and then I'll come back with more minor items.
Lynn, you're on mute.
How's that?
Much better.
The question came up originally, I think, when there were a couple of meetings. One was of the people planning the JEDI process, and then one where 3 directors wanted to get together and talk about their area, their stakeholders and constituents, roughly, I think. And there was some question of whether that was customary for the board. So we have provided language. We've sent it to Ms. Snyder and Ms. McManus and Ms. Johnson for review. And but basically it says that 3 or more directors could get together for an informal meeting or gathering to discuss items that will be for planning or ultimately would come to the board or are important to their constituents, as long as they meet statutory requirements of open meetings or any other requirements, and also give other board members email notice 24 hours before the meeting so that others could attend, presumably if they want to. So we're waiting now, unless something's come through this morning that I haven't seen. We're waiting for response on that, and we'll bring it back to you, I guess, when we have something final.
Great, thanks. Secretary Sloan, is there something else, a follow-up from you?
There is other things that came up, and there certainly may be more when we were reviewing it. Suggestions could be additional material for the governance manual, and also incorporating the board operating guidelines into the governance manual. So we had one document with the expectations for board members, because in different ways, both the documents overlap in some ways and could easily be melded into one. Additional material could be the full board may want to discuss and agree on a description of the difference between governance and management, because there are 2 different descriptions of the difference in, trying to find the distinction between both. There's one in the governance manual and a different one in the operating guidelines. And possibly we could insert in the responsibilities of board of directors language referring to the ad hoc committee's responsibility for the internal audit function, because that is a specific responsibility of the board. Another one could include the deletion of creating a responsibility to create an advisory committee made up of former directors who shall meet not less than once a year. In my knowledge, that has not been a responsibility of the board. And I'm sure there are other items that will come up, but these can be considered more substantive changes.
Great, thank you, Secretary Sloan and First Vice Chair Geisinger for all the work you guys are doing on this. It's a really important task. The more we can have a clean product at the end, the better for all of us going forward. So are there any questions for either First Vice Chair Geisinger or Secretary Sloan with regard to the work they're doing? Thumbs up from Treasurer Whitmore, thanks. Good work. Thank you so much for doing that. Next, we're going to move on to the monthly government relations report. And just so you know, we're going to be moving this further up on the agenda because it is a a recurring event every executive committee and part of our remit. We're going to make this a regular item further up on the agenda. But for this month, here's where we are. And General Manager, CEO Johnson, do you want to do the report or have a member of your staff give us this report?
Mr. Davies will give the report, but just point of clarification in reference to the comment that you made, sir. I just wanted to qualify, since this is a committee and we have recommended action and discussion items, it would be most appropriate that this would be under discussion as we go forward. So just wanted to qualify so it's in alignment with the other committees. So thank you very much for the opportunity to voice that.
Thanks for that clarification.
Hello, Chair, members of the committee, Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer, presenting a brief government relations update. I'm going to start with the federal side. So current funding for the federal government runs out tomorrow. There is agreement. The House has already previously passed another continuing resolution that will keep the federal government funded through March 11th. The Senate is anticipated to approve that action. It is beyond March 11th. There is certainly, it seems to be agreement among members of Congress that there's going to be another continuing resolution. It will potentially even be shorter than this continuing resolution. And I think the only good news to report out of that is that it is short and that there has been general agreement toward the top line numbers that you need to agree between House and Senate that allow the appropriations committees to funnel that money through the subcommittees. And that is ultimately what is needed to come to agreement on a larger omnibus bill. This is not me recommending that you hold your breath for Congress to take action on this, but it is certainly a good sign that things are moving in the right direction. And of course, it should be noted that until Congress approves a full year omnibus appropriations package, which runs from October 1st of 2021 through September 30th, 2022, you need that full year appropriations package for the bipartisan infrastructure law funding to actually flow to agencies and be realized by the federal government. So that is a key action that we're certainly tracking and encouraging our congressional delegation on. Moving on to the state, obviously closely tracking actions during the legislative session. One of the bills that we're closely tracking, we previously talked about during this meeting, the Alternative Transportation Options Tax Credit. Another bill I just want to highlight for you that we are tracking that was more recently introduced is House Bill 221138, and that is the Reduce Employee Single Occupancy Vehicle Trips legislation. That's sponsored by Representative Gray, Representative Herod, Senator Winter, and Senator Hansen. The first hearing for that bill is scheduled for Monday in the House Finance Committee. And just a couple of quick notes that we are tracking it, but it does take a bit of a departure, but does also have similarities with the Alternative Transportation Tax Credit. While it does offer a tax credit, it offers it only if an employee creates what they're calling a clean commute plan. That clean commute plan does have quite a bit of other aspects other than transit passes and ride sharing, which is qualified under the Alternative Transportation Options Tax Credit bill. But it also qualifies expenses such as remote working programs or parking management programs. And so there are some other aspects of that bill that tie in and also qualify for the tax credit. There are some additional hurdles for employers that need to report to the state and do consistent reporting to the state as a result of being able to get that tax credit as well. I'll end there on that note. And then just lastly, on the local front, as mentioned in the report, closely tracking actions that groups like the Metro's Mayor's Caucus or DRCOG are taking on pieces of legislation and actively participating in their meetings. And for example, the Northwest Mayors and Commissioners Coalition, they are meeting and do their annual trip with our federal delegation back in DC, and RTD is of course in partnership with them, supporting and being a part of those meetings. So I think that will conclude my report, and happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks for that report. Director Tisdale, I see your hand up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. I wanted to raise one issue regarding House Bill 1026. There has been some perhaps misdescription that has come into the discussion here. The bill would take a current tax deduction, which is something that employers take as a reduction in their income, and turn it into a 50% tax credit, which constitutes a credit against tax dollars owed. So it magnifies the impact of the dollars, and hence the discussion that it's actually an increase. But I think to the extent that we talk about deductions versus credits, it's important to remember there is currently a tax deduction for the expense taken, and that reduces your income by 100% of the dollars that you spend on such tax preferred activity, bus passes and so forth, turns it into a tax credit, which actually credits directly against the tax bill that you owe to the state. And so to that extent, it is an increase. Secondly, I do want to report that yesterday I was in conversation with Ward McGarriger, who's the chief lobbyist for the American Public Transportation Association. And the association is going to be taking a position and talking with leaders in Congress regarding any efforts to reduce or eliminate the federal gas tax, because that gas tax, as you know, is an important part of funding for the Department of Transportation and the FTA. So that's just a heads up on where APTA is heading relative to this discussion that you may have heard regarding reductions in the gas tax. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. Are there any other questions or comments for Mr. Davies? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So Michael, thank you very much for that report. Anything else? Any other matters to come before the executive committee? I don't see any hands raised. So seeing none,
I have
No.
one, Chair.
Okay, sorry, you're there.
That's all right. I was
Okay.
slow in
Go.
getting to it. I think you and I just talked about this yesterday. Our bylaws say that at the beginning of the year, the board will schedule study sessions during the year. And I think we had all our Jedi sessions, and that hasn't happened. But I think, coming out of the retreat, there may be some follow-up we want to do. There's certainly a lot of things that would be of interest to the board, one of which would be the really good work that the consultants and our Reimagine team have done on Tabor, sort of the background and just the overall look at that. I could come up with a number of things that I think would be interesting discussions for the board. So I would like to see us get those scheduled, maybe one a quarter, moving
Yeah.
forward.
Good point. Yeah, I agree with that. And now that we've got those time slots opened up from the other matter that's not moving forward, I'll work with Ms. McManus to redo the calendar to make sure we have a study session, just generically at least to start with, put on that calendar.
Thank you.
Secretary Sloan.
Yes, Lynn's comment just prompted me to ask if there's an update on the status of the retreat. We have the date scheduled. What else?
Vice
Chair? Okay.
I can give that too. We have a committee. I think it's Ms. McManus and Mr. McKay and I think Taishrei, Ms. Parrish and me, and we'll be meeting. I think the facilitators' responses to the scope of work are due next Tuesday, the 22nd. We'll be meeting the 25th to go. We'll be doing score sheets, and then meeting the 25th to go through those. And I talked to Ms. McManus about sending the scope of work out to the rest of the board. It lists several items that we kind of pulled from people's comments before, that suggestions for the board retreat, and also says that others could be added or they could be substituted if we want to after the facilitator interviews all of the board members.
Great. Thank you for that update. And thanks for your work and the team's work on making that happen. Any other items for discussion? Seeing none, I will declare this meeting adjourned at 12:35 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Have a great day.